Chief Engineer Jeffrey Morales cursed under his breath as the Horizon's life support systems failed, triggering an emergency protocol that sent all 50 human crew members into cryostasis. He stood alone in the engine room, sweat beading on his forehead as he frantically worked to restore power to the interstellar research vessel. Alarms blared throughout the ship, their urgent wails echoing off the metal walls. Jeffrey's fingers flew across the control panels, his mind racing to identify the source of the malfunction. The ship's systems flickered, bathing the engine room in an eerie, pulsating red glow. A movement caught his eye. Stella, the Horizon's sole alien passenger, emerged from her quarters. The Shellyak female approached Jeffrey with an intensity he'd never seen in her typically reserved demeanor. Her bioluminescent skin pulsed with vibrant colors, shifting from deep purples to electric blues. "Jeffrey," Stella said, her voice tight with tension, "the environmental changes. They've triggered something in me." He turned to face her, momentarily distracted from his work. "What do you mean?" Stella's skin flashed a brilliant yellow. "My species' mating cycle. It started early." Jeffrey's eyes widened as he processed the implications. He'd read about Shellyak biology during the mission briefing, but much of the information had been classified or redacted. "Your pheromones," he said, realization dawning. "They affect other species." Stella nodded, her form seeming to shimmer in the dim light. "Including humans. You're already being impacted." As if on cue, Jeffrey felt a wave of dizziness wash over him. His heart raced, and he found it increasingly difficult to focus on the task at hand. He gripped the edge of the console, steadying himself. "We need to find a way to suppress your biological processes," Jeffrey said, his voice strained, "or isolate you from the rest of the crew. Once they're revived from cryostasis, they'll be compromised," Stella finished, unable to function normally. Jeffrey turned back to the ship's systems, his mind now split between two critical tasks. He pulled up a schematic of the Horizon, searching for a suitable location to contain Stella's pheromones. His eyes fell on a sealed section of the ship, accessible only through damaged corridors. "There," he said, pointing to the screen. "We might be able to create a containment field there. But first, I need to repair the life support systems." Stella moved closer, her proximity sending another wave of disorientation through Jeffrey. "The components you need, they're in the sealed sections, aren't they?" Jeffrey nodded grimly. "I'll have to navigate through the damaged areas. It's risky, but we don't have a choice." He gathered the necessary tools and equipment, acutely aware of Stella's presence behind him. As he prepared to embark on his dangerous mission, Jeffrey accessed the ship's biological database, hoping to find information that might help him devise a solution to their predicament. To his frustration, he found that much of the data on Shellyak biology was restricted. Encrypted files and redacted sections filled the screen, hinting at a deeper mystery surrounding Stella's presence on a human vessel. Jeffrey turned to Stella, questions forming on his lips, but another surge of her pheromones hit him. He staggered, bracing himself against the wall. The situation was deteriorating faster than he'd anticipated. With a deep breath, he steeled himself for the challenges ahead. Time was running out. Jeffrey had to repair the ship's systems, find a way to contain Stella's pheromones, and unravel the mystery of the classified Shellyak data, all while fighting the increasingly powerful effects of alien biology on his own mind and body. The fate of the entire crew rested on his shoulders, and failure was not an option. Jeffrey's mind raced as he accessed the ship's biological database, desperately searching for information that might help him devise a solution to their predicament. His fingers flew across the console, navigating through encrypted files and redacted sections. The screen flickered, casting an eerie glow on his face as he squinted at the limited data available. "Damn it," he muttered, frustration evident in his voice. "Most of the Shellyak biological data is restricted. What are they hiding?" He turned to Stella, questions forming on his lips, but another surge of her pheromones hit him like a tidal wave. He staggered, bracing himself against the wall as dizziness threatened to overwhelm him. The situation was deteriorating faster than he'd anticipated. Taking a deep breath, Jeffrey steeled himself for the challenges ahead. "Stella," he said, his voice strained, "I need to access the medical bay. It might have compounds to suppress your pheromone production." Stella's bioluminescent skin pulsed with concern. The medical bay is in one of the sealed sections. How will you reach it? Jeffrey's eyes darted to a schematic of the ship displayed on a nearby screen. The maintenance tunnels, he replied, tracing a path with his finger. It's risky, but it's our only option. Without wasting another moment, Jeffrey gathered the necessary tools and equipment. He approached the entrance to the maintenance tunnels, a narrow hatch that seemed to loom before him. As he prepared to enter, he felt Stella's presence behind him. "Be careful, Jeffrey," she said, her voice tinged with worry. "The effects of my pheromones will only intensify in confined spaces." Nodding grimly, Jeffrey opened the hatch and began his treacherous journey. The maintenance tunnels were a claustrophobic maze of exposed circuitry and cramped passages. He crawled forward on his hands and knees, the metal grating digging into his palms. As he navigated the tunnels, the effects of Stella's pheromones became increasingly apparent. His heart hammered in his chest, each beat echoing in his ears. Sweat beaded on his forehead, and his skin felt flushed and hypersensitive. Every movement required intense concentration as he fought against the fog settling over his mind. Jeffrey paused at an intersection, consulting his mental map of the ship. "Left," he murmured to himself, turning down a narrow passage. As he moved, he noticed pockets of stale air, a clear sign of the failing life support systems. After what felt like hours of crawling through the suffocating tunnels, Jeffrey finally reached the access panel to the medical bay. His hands trembled as he worked to bypass the security protocols, his fingers slipping on the controls. The panel beeped in denial, flashing red. Jeffrey cursed under his breath, trying again. On his third attempt, the lock finally disengaged with a satisfying click. He pushed the panel open and tumbled into the medical bay, gasping for breath. As he regained his footing, Jeffrey's heart sank. The medical bay was in lockdown, its automated systems having sealed off the medication storage in response to the life support failure. He approached the storage unit, his mind racing to recall the override procedures. "Come on, focus," he muttered, wiping sweat from his brow. His first attempt at the manual override failed, his compromised state making it difficult to input the correct sequence. On the second try, his trembling fingers slipped, hitting the wrong keys. Taking a deep breath, Jeffrey closed his eyes for a moment, willing his racing heart to slow. He opened his eyes, fixed them on the keypad, and with deliberate movements, entered the override code. The storage unit hummed to life, its doors sliding open. Jeffrey quickly scanned the array of medical supplies, searching for anything related to celiac biology. His eyes landed on a vial labeled celiac hormone suppressant. As he reached for it, a nearby computer terminal caught his attention. Curiosity piqued, Jeffrey accessed the terminal. His eyes widened as he uncovered a classified file detailing a covert research project involving celiac biology. The implications hit him like a physical blow. Stella's presence on the ship might not be as innocent as he'd been led to believe. With the suppressant in hand and his knees going weak from this new information, Jeffrey began his journey back through the maintenance tunnels. The return trip proved even more challenging as the ship's artificial gravity began to fluctuate. One moment he felt as light as a feather, the next he was crushed against the tunnel floor. Jeffrey timed his movements carefully, pushing off walls and pulling himself along during moments of low gravity, then bracing himself when the gravity intensified. He narrowly avoided being thrown into exposed electrical components, the crackling energy a stark reminder of the danger surrounding him. Finally, Jeffrey emerged from the maintenance tunnels onto the main deck. His relief was short-lived as he took in the sight before him. Stella stood in the center of the room, her bioluminescent skin pulsating rapidly. The intensity of her glow seemed to synchronize with the failing systems of the ship, creating a disorienting strobe effect. "Stella," Jeffrey called out, holding up the suppressant. "I found something that might help." As he approached, Stella's agitation became more apparent. Her colors shifted rapidly, a kaleidoscope of emotions playing across her skin. "Jeffrey," she said, her voice strained, "I've discovered something while you were gone." She gestured to a nearby console where the ship's communication logs were displayed. "I accessed the transmissions. Our mission, it's not what we thought. They're using me, using us for some kind of weapons research." Jeffrey's stomach dropped as he realized the full implications of what he'd discovered in the medical bay. He looked down at the suppressant in his hand, then back at Stella, the weight of his decision bearing down on him. Before he could respond, ship-wide alarms began to blare, their urgent wails cutting through the tense atmosphere. Warning messages flashed across every screen, life support systems reaching critical failure, cryostasis pods showing signs of instability. Jeffrey stood frozen, the suppressant in one hand, the fate of Stella and the entire crew in the other. The ship groaned around them, systems failing one by one. Time was running out, and every possible choice seemed fraught with danger and moral ambiguity. As Jeffrey grappled with his decision, Stella's glow intensified, casting long shadows across the deteriorating ship. The future of the mission, the crew, and potentially interstellar relations hung in the balance, awaiting Jeffrey's next move. Move! Jeffrey's mind raced, his body trembling with the intensity of Stella's pheromones and the weight of the decision before him. He looked down at the suppressant in his hand, then back at Stella, her bioluminescent skin pulsating with a kaleidoscope of colors. In that moment, clarity cut through the fog of his compromised state. He couldn't be party to an unethical weapons research project, nor could he rob Stella of her autonomy. With a resolute shake of his head, Jeffrey set the suppressant aside. "No," he said, his voice hoarse but determined. "We won't use this. We'll find another way." Stella's colors shifted, a mix of relief and concern washing over her form. "But the crew—" "We'll save them," Jeffrey interrupted, moving towards the nearest console. "Together, your knowledge of Shellyak technology combined with my understanding of human engineering might be our best shot." As if in response to his words, the ship groaned ominously. Warning klaxons blared, their urgent wails punctuated by the hiss of failing systems. Jeffrey's fingers flew across the console, bringing up schematics of the life support systems. "We need to stabilize life support first," he said, gesturing for Stella to join him. "Can you make sense of these readings?" Stella leaned in, her proximity sending a fresh wave of dizziness through Jeffrey. He gritted his teeth, forcing himself to focus on the task at hand. As Stella analyzed the data, her bioluminescence pulsed in time with the scrolling information. "There," she said, pointing to a section of the schematic. "The primary circulation hub is offline. If we can reroute power from auxiliary systems, we might be able to jumpstart it," Jeffrey finished, already inputting commands. As they worked, Jeffrey became acutely aware of changes in his own body. His senses seemed heightened, every sound and smell more intense. His muscles thrummed with unexpected energy, allowing him to move with surprising speed and precision. Together, they managed to stabilize the immediate life support crisis, but Jeffrey knew it was only a temporary fix. As he wiped sweat from his brow, his gaze fell on a power readout. "The primary power core," he muttered, eyes widening. "It's been damaged. Sabotage?" Stella's colors darkened. "Likely related to the covert research." Jeffrey nodded grimly. "We need to realign it manually. It's the only way to restore full power and life support." They made their way to the core chamber, Jeffrey's enhanced senses picking up every creak and groan of the failing ship. At the entrance, he paused, studying the radiation readings with growing concern. "It's too high," he said, turning to Stella. "Human physiology can't withstand those levels." Stella's form shimmered. "My species has a higher tolerance for radiation. I could enter." Jeffrey shook his head. "You don't have the technical expertise to perform the realignment. I'll have to guide you through it remotely." As Stella prepared to enter the chamber, her bioluminescence intensified dramatically, bathing the area in a mesmerizing glow. Jeffrey felt a sudden, overwhelming attraction, his compromised state amplifying the effect of her pheromones. Their eyes met, a moment of unspoken tension stretching between them. With visible effort, Stella turned away, stepping into the airlock. Jeffrey moved to the control panel, pushing aside the lingering effects of their near moment. "Ready?" he asked, his voice tight. "Ready," Stella confirmed. As the inner door of the airlock slid open, Jeffrey began guiding Stella through the complex process of realigning the core. Her luminescence pulsed erratically, a visual representation of the strain the radiation was putting on her system. Now rotate the stabilizer 30 degrees counterclockwise, Jeffrey instructed, his enhanced senses allowing him to pick up minute changes in the core's energy output. Suddenly, alarms blared from a nearby console. Jeffrey's heart leapt into his throat as he saw the cryostasis pod readings fluctuating wildly. No, 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 he muttered, fingers flying across the controls. The combination of system failures and Stella's intensified pheromones was causing the pods to malfunction, initiating premature wake-up sequences. Jeffrey found himself split between two critical tasks, guiding Stella through the core realignment and preventing the crew from waking into a potentially lethal environment. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he raced against time, his enhanced abilities pushed to their limits. Stella, you need to increase power to the magnetic containment field, he called out, even as he worked to stabilize the cryopods. Careful, too much and you'll overload the... A sudden surge of energy cut him off. The ship's systems roared to life, power flooding back into long-dormant circuits. Life support stabilized, but the abrupt change accelerated the cryopod's wake-up sequences. Jeffrey, Stella's voice crackled over the comm. The realignment is complete, but the radiation, it's affecting my biology. My pheromone production is spiking beyond control. Cursing under his breath, Jeffrey initiated a ship-wide decontamination sequence. He watched the readouts anxiously, praying the filters would clear Stella's pheromones before the crew fully awakened. The inner door of the core chamber slid open, revealing Stella. Her body pulsed with residual radiation, her bioluminescence so bright it was almost painful to look at. Around them, the sounds of rebooting systems mingled with the hiss of opening cryopods. Jeffrey and Stella locked eyes, a mixture of relief and uncertainty passing between them. They had averted one crisis, but now faced the daunting task of explaining the situation to the awakening crew and dealing with the fallout of the revealed covert operation. As the first groggy crew member stumbled from their pod, Jeffrey took a deep breath, steeling himself for the challenges ahead. The unwill-powered tension between him and Stella hung in the air, an added complication to an already complex situation. But for now, they had a ship to save and a crew to protect. Jeffrey stepped forward, ready to face whatever came next. But he was unprepared for the chaos that erupted as the cryostasis pods began to open. The ship's filtration system hummed loudly, working overtime to neutralize Stella's intensified pheromones. But it was clear that it wasn't enough. The first crew member to stumble out of their pod was Dr. Elena Rodriguez, the ship's chief medical officer. Her eyes were unfocused, and she swayed on her feet, looking around with a mixture of confusion and unmistakable arousal. "What's happening?" she slurred, her gaze locking onto Stella. "I feel strange." Before Jeffrey could respond, Captain Marcus Blackwood emerged from his pod, his usual stoic demeanor cracking as he took in the scene before him. Jeffrey quickly moved to brief him on the situation. "Captain, we have a situation," Jeffrey began, struggling to keep his voice steady as another wave of Stella's pheromones washed over him. "The ship experienced multiple system failures, and Stella's biology has been affected. Her pheromone production is out of control." Captain Blackwood listened intently, his expression growing more concerned with each passing second. As Jeffrey finished his explanation, the captain's eyes widened, and he loosened his collar, clearly feeling the effects himself. "This is unexpected," Blackwood said, his voice husky. He shook his head, visibly trying to clear it. "We need to contain this situation before it spirals out of control. All awakened crew members are to report to designated quarantine areas immediately." As the captain's orders were relayed through the ship's communication system, more pods hissed open. The emerging crew members displayed varying degrees of disorientation and arousal, some stumbling towards Stella as if drawn by an invisible force. Jeffrey watched as Stella's condition continued to intensify. Her bioluminescence pulsed in rapid, mesmerizing patterns, and she wrapped her arms around herself, clearly struggling with her own urges. "Jeffrey!" she called out, her voice strained. I can't control it. It's getting worse." He moved towards her, fighting against his own body's reactions. The prolonged exposure to her pheromones had left him hypersensitive, every movement sending jolts of electricity through his nerves. "We'll figure this out, Stella," he assured her, though his voice lacked conviction. As more crew members awakened, the ship's systems groaned under the increased load. The life support system fluctuated, causing temperature spikes in various sections of the ship. Crew members began shedding layers of clothing, inadvertently increasing their skin contact with the pheromone-laden air. Dr. Rodriguez, having regained some of her composure, immediately set to work analyzing Stella's biology and the effects of her pheromones on the human crew. She worked feverishly, her movements jerky and uncoordinated, as she fought against her own body's responses. "This is fascinating," she muttered, reviewing the data on her tablet. "The pheromones are causing hormonal changes in humans, enhanced strength, heightened senses, accelerated healing, but at what cost?" As if in answer to her question, a commotion erupted near the quarantine area. Lieutenant John Chen, head of the ship's security team, was struggling to restrain a crew member who was attempting to break free. "I need to see her," the crew member shouted, his eyes wild. "You don't understand. I need to be with her." Chen grappled with the man, his own movements clumsy and uncoordinated. "Stand down," he barked, but his voice lacked its usual authority. Jeffrey and Captain Blackwood exchanged worried glances. The situation was rapidly deteriorating. "We need to modify the ship's air circulation system," Jeffrey suggested. "If we can increase its efficiency, we might be able to filter out more of the pheromones." Blackwood nodded, his lips pursed tight. "Make it happen. Assemble teams to access the environmental control systems. We need to act fast." As Jeffrey began organizing the teams, he couldn't help but notice the way Stella's luminescence seemed to pulse, in sync with his racing heart. Their eyes met across the room, and for a moment the chaos around them faded away. The pull between them was almost tangible, a force as real and powerful as gravity. Dr. Rodriguez's voice cut through the moment. "Captain Jeffrey, I need to speak with you urgently," she called out, her face pale. "It's about Stella's condition. If she doesn't engage in her species mating ritual soon, the consequences could be severe, possibly even fatal." The words hit Jeffrey like a physical blow. He looked at Stella, saw the pain and desperation in her eyes, and felt his purpose crumbling. The thought of losing her was unbearable, but the implications of what might be necessary to save her were overwhelming. Captain Blackwood's voice crackled over the ship-wide communication system, breaking through Jeffrey's tumultuous thoughts. "Attention, all crew members. This is Captain Blackwood. We are facing an unprecedented crisis." As the captain detailed the situation, including the revelations about the covert research project, Jeffrey found himself moving towards Stella. They came together as if pulled by an invisible force, their bodies mere inches apart. "Jeffrey," Stella whispered, her luminescence pulsing rapidly. "I don't know how much longer I can—" He reached out, his fingers hovering just above her shimmering skin. The air between them seemed to crackle with energy. "Stella, They stood on the precipice, the fate of the ship, the crew, and their own blossoming relationship hanging in the balance. As chaos reigned around them, Jeffrey and Stella teetered on the edge of giving in to their mutual attraction, the consequences of their next actions impossible to predict. The tension between them was electric, charged with a potent mix of desire and uncertainty. Suddenly, Dr. Rodriguez's voice cut through the haze. "Captain, Jeffrey, Stella, I've made a breakthrough." The urgency in her tones snapped Jeffrey and Stella out of their trance. They turned to face the doctor, who was rushing towards them with a tablet in hand, her eyes wide with excitement and concern. "I've analyzed Stella's biology," Dr. Rodriguez explained, her words tumbling out in a rush. "The celiac mating process involves a symbiotic exchange of genetic material. It could stabilize her condition and reduce the pheromone output." Captain Blackwood stepped forward, his brow furrowed. "That's good news, Doctor, but how do we proceed?" Dr. Rodriguez's expression turned grave. "There's a catch. It requires a compatible partner, and given the circumstances—" She paused, her eyes flickering between Jeffrey and Stella. "Jeffrey is the only viable candidate due to his prolonged exposure and apparent adaptation to Stella's pheromones." The implications of her words hung heavy in the air. Jeffrey felt a surge of conflicting emotions: desire, fear, and a deep sense of responsibility. Captain Blackwood paced, his movements agitated. The ship groaned around them, systems fluctuating as the crew's condition deteriorated. He stopped abruptly, turning to face Jeffrey and Stella. "We're out of options," he said, his voice tight. "Doctor, prepare a sealed medical bay for the procedure. Equip it with specialized air filtration systems to contain the pheromones." As Dr. Rodriguez hurried off to make preparations, Jeffrey and Stella exchanged a look of mutual understanding and trepidation. The captain's next words were directed at them. "I know this is unconventional," he said, struggling to find the right words, "but the safety of this ship and its crew depends on stabilizing Stella's condition. Are you both willing to proceed?" Jeffrey nodded, his throat dry. "Yes, sir." Stella's luminescence pulsed in agreement. "I am willing." As they were led to the medical bay, the ship's corridors were a chaos of flashing lights and blaring alarms. Crew members stumbled about, their movements erratic, eyes unfocused. The effects of Stella's pheromones were reaching a critical point. Inside the sealed medical bay, Dr. Rodriguez worked quickly, attaching sensors to both Jeffrey and Stella. The air was thick with tension and the low hum of specialized filtration systems. "I'll monitor your vital signs throughout the procedure," she explained, her professional demeanor belied by a slight tremor in her hands. "If anything goes wrong, we'll intervene immediately." As Jeffrey and Stella moved closer to each other, the intensity of their attraction magnified. Stella's bioluminescence began to pulse rapidly, filling the room with an otherworldly glow. Jeffrey felt an overwhelming urge to touch her, his enhanced senses hyper-aware of every subtle change in her body. Just as they were about to make contact, a loud bang echoed through the ship. Captain Blackwood's voice crackled over the intercom, tension evident in his tone. "Doctor, we have a situation. A group of affected crew members are attempting to breach the medical bay. Lieutenant Chen is struggling to contain them." Dr. Rodriguez's eyes widened in alarm, but she kept her focus on the task at hand. "Understood, Captain. We're proceeding with the mating procedure. It's our only chance to grit this crisis." As Jeffrey and Stella began the intimate process of symbiotic exchange, the ship around them seemed to come alive. Lights flickered, and the hum of machinery grew louder. Unknown to the occupied participants, the Horizon's AI system suddenly reactivated, initiating a series of pre-programmed protocols in response to the Sheliak biological signatures. On the bridge, Captain Blackwood and his crew watched in confusion as the ship's systems began to reconfigure themselves. Screens flashed with unfamiliar data, and the navigation system locked onto an unknown set of coordinates. "What the hell is happening?" Blackwood demanded, his fingers flying over the control panel. His second-in-command, Lieutenant Sarah Hawkins, shook her head in disbelief. "Sir, it appears the ship is evolving. These protocols weren't in any of our briefings." Back in the medical bay, Jeffrey and Stella were lost in their connection, oblivious to the chaos unfolding around them. Their bodies intertwined, a soft glow emanating from the point of contact between them. Dr. Rodriguez watched in fascination as her instruments recorded unprecedented changes in their physiology. Suddenly, Stella's bioluminescence intensified dramatically. The burst of light was so bright that Dr. Rodriguez had to shield her eyes. The ship's sensors overloaded, plunging the Horizon into momentary darkness. When the light subsided, Jeffrey and Stella lay unconscious on the medical bay floor. Dr. Rodriguez rushed to check their vital signs, her heart pounding. To her relief, they were stable, but her instruments detected significant genetic alterations in both of them. As she began to analyze these changes, a violent shudder ran through the ship. The view screens flickered to life, revealing a startling sight. The Horizon had dropped out of faster-than-light travel and emerged in an unknown star system. Dominating the view was a massive space station of clearly alien design, its architecture unmistakably Sheliak in origin. Captain Blackwood's voice came over the intercom, tense and urgent. "All hands, brace for possible contact. We're being drawn in by some kind of tractor beam." In the medical bay, Jeffrey and Stella began to stir. Their eyes fluttered open, revealing an otherworldly glow that hadn't been there before. They sat up slowly, their movements synchronized, and turned to look at each other with a new understanding. Dr. Rodriguez watched them with a mixture of scientific curiosity and apprehension. Whatever had happened between them, whatever changes they had undergone, it was clear that Jeffrey and Stella were no longer entirely human or Shellyak. They were something new, something unprecedented. As the horizon was pulled inexorably towards the alien space station, Jeffrey and Stella rose to their feet, their bodies moving with a fluid grace that seemed almost inhuman. They turned towards the view screen, their glowing eyes fixed on the approaching structure. "We need to go to the bridge," Jeffrey said, his voice carrying a new resonance. Stella nodded, her luminescence pulsing in agreement. "Yes, we have much to explain." Together they moved towards the door, leaving a stunned Dr. Rodriguez in their wake. As they stepped into the corridor, the ship's systems seemed to respond to their presence, lights brightening and doors opening automatically. The crew of the Horizon, still reeling from the effects of the pheromone crisis and the sudden appearance of the alien station, were about to face an even greater shock. Jeffrey and Stella, transformed by their union, held the key to unraveling the mystery of the Horizon's true purpose and the secrets hidden within the looming Shellyak structure. As they approached the bridge, the ship hummed with anticipation, its hidden protocols awakening one by one. The next phase of the Horizon's journey was about to begin, and nothing would ever be the same again. As Jeffrey and Stella approached the bridge, the ship's systems responded to their presence, doors sliding open before they could reach them. The crew turned to stare as the pair entered, their movements fluid and synchronized, an otherworldly glow emanating from their eyes. Captain Blackwood stepped forward, his expression a mix of concern and relief. "Jeffrey, Stella, are you all right? What happened in there?" Before they could answer, the ship shuddered violently. Lieutenant Hawkins called out from her station, "Captain, we're being pulled in by some kind of tractor beam." All eyes turned to the view screen, where the massive Shellyak space station loomed ever closer. As they watched, the pheromone-induced chaos that had gripped the crew began to subside. Crew members who had been disoriented and agitated moments before now blinked in confusion, their minds clearing. Dr. Rodriguez burst onto the bridge, her tablet clutched tightly in her hand. "Captain, you won't believe this. The ship's systems are stabilizing, and the pheromone levels are dissipating rapidly." Jeffrey and Stella exchanged a knowing look before turning to address the captain. "We can explain," Jeffrey began, his voice carrying a new resonance that commanded attention. "We've changed, and we can sense others like Stella on that station." Stella nodded, her luminescence pulsing gently. "There are many Shellyak entities aboard. They're waiting for something." Captain Blackwood opened his mouth to respond, but was cut off as the ship was enveloped by the station's massive docking bay. The Horizon settled onto the alien floor with a soft thud, the bay doors closing behind them with an ominous finality. "Attempts to communicate with the station are failing, sir," Lieutenant Chen reported, his fingers flying over his console. "We're getting no response on any frequency." The captain paced for a moment, his mind racing through their options. Finally, he turned to face his crew. "We need to investigate and establish contact. Jeffrey, Stella, Lieutenant Chen, and Dr. Rodriguez, you're with me. We'll form an away team to explore the station." As they prepared to disembark, Jeffrey and Stella's eyes suddenly glazed over, their bodies tensing. "Captain," Jeffrey said, his voice distant, "we can see the station's layout. It's like we're interfacing with its system somehow." Dr. Rodriguez's eyes widened in fascination. "It must be a side effect of their genetic alteration. This could be incredibly useful for navigating the station safely." With Jeffrey and Stella's newfound abilities guiding them, the away team exited the Horizon. They stepped into a world that defied their expectations. The station's interior was a breathtaking fusion of biology and technology, pulsating organic structures intertwined with gleaming metal surfaces, creating an environment that seemed alive. As they moved deeper into the station, they encountered various automated systems and defense mechanisms. Each time, Jeffrey and Stella were able to interface with the alien technology, bypassing obstacles that would have otherwise halted their progress. "It's incredible," Dr. Rodriguez whispered, her scientific curiosity overriding her apprehension. "It's as if the station recognizes them as authorized users. Their journey led them to a vast chamber that stretched beyond sight. Row upon row of stasis pods lined the walls, each containing a motionless Shellyak figure. The team stood in awe of the scale of the operation before them. Stella's luminescence flickered rapidly as she processed the information flooding her mind. "This is a seed ship," she explained, her voice filled with wonder. "It's designed to preserve our civilization in case of a catastrophe. These are my people, waiting to be awakened." As they moved to investigate further, a deep thrumming filled the air. Panels slid open in the chamber's walls, and imposing figures emerged. Their bodies were covered in intricate glowing patterns that pulsed with almost unchecked energy. The Shellyak Guardians had awakened. The two groups faced each other in a tense standoff. Captain Blackwood's hand hovered near his weapon, while Lieutenant Chen shifted into a defensive stance. The Guardians, however, seemed more intrigued than hostile, their attention fixed on Jeffrey and Stella. One of the Guardians stepped forward, its bioluminescent patterns swirling in complex patterns. A mix of verbal and telepathic communication filled the air as Jeffrey and Stella engaged with the alien beings. "They're dying," Stella translated, her voice heavy with emotion. "The Shellyak civilization is facing extinction due to a genetic bottleneck. They can't reproduce effectively anymore." Jeffrey continued, his eyes glowing brightly as he processed the information. "The hybridization project that led to our transformation was a last-ditch effort to introduce new genetic diversity. They see us as the key to saving their entire species." The Guardian gestured towards Jeffrey and Stella, its movements graceful yet insistent. Captain Blackwood tensed, sensing the weight of the moment. "What do they want?" he asked, his voice low and cautious. Stella turned to face the captain, her expression a mix of hope and uncertainty. "They want to study us, to understand how our hybrid physiology works. They believe it could be the solution they've been searching for." As the implications of this request sank in, the team became aware of an incoming transmission from the horizon. Lieutenant Hawkins's voice crackled over their comms, tinged with a mix of excitement and concern. "Captain, we're seeing some strange developments here. Crew members are exhibiting unexpected physical changes, enhanced senses, increased strength, even some minor Shellyak characteristics. It seems the pheromone exposure has triggered some kind of transformation." Captain Blackwood closed his eyes briefly, the weight of command bearing down on him. The fate of two species now hung in the balance, with Jeffrey and Stella's unprecedented union at the center of it all. As he contemplated his next move, the Shellyak Guardians waited patiently, their bioluminescent patterns pulsing with what could only be described as hope. Hope. The air in the chamber crackled with tension as Captain Blackwood made his decision. "We'll cooperate," he said firmly, addressing both his team and the Shellyak Guardians. "But I want assurances that my crew will be safe and that we'll be free to leave once we've helped you." The lead Guardian's bioluminescent patterns swirled in what seemed to be agreement. Jeffrey and Stella translated simultaneously, their voices overlapping in an eerie harmony. "They agree to your terms, Captain," Jeffrey said. "They're eager to begin the tests." Over the next few hours, Jeffrey and Stella underwent a series of non-invasive scans and tests. Dr. Rodriguez assisted the Shellyak scientists, her eyes wide with fascination as she observed their advanced medical technology. The rest of the away team watched nervously, still unsure of their host's true intentions. As the test progressed, Lieutenant Chen's communicator chirped urgently. "Sir," he said, turning to Captain Blackwood, "Lieutenant Hawkins is reporting some unusual developments back on the horizon." Blackwood frowned, taking the communicator. "Hawkins, report. What's going on?" Hawkins's voice came through, tinged with a mix of awe and concern. "Captain, the crew, they're changing. We're seeing increased strength, enhanced senses, even some minor Shellyak characteristics appearing. It seems the pheromone exposure triggered some kind of transformation." The captain's mind raced, considering the implications. He glanced at Jeffrey and Stella, who were now conferring quietly with the Shellyak scientists. "Keep monitoring the situation, Hawkins. We'll be back as soon as we can." As days passed, the horizon became a crucible of change. Dr. Rodriguez, splitting her time between the ship and the station, worked tirelessly to document and understand the crew's transformations. In the gym, Ensign Patel lifted weights that would have been impossible for him just days ago. In the mess hall, Lieutenant Garcia described the new flavors she could taste in the bland ship rations. But not everyone embraced these changes. Tensions rose as some crew members reveled in their new abilities, while others feared losing their humanity. Arguments broke out in corridors, and Captain Blackwood found himself implementing stricter security protocols to maintain order. On the station, Jeffrey and Stella's bond deepened as they worked alongside the Sheliak scientists. Their unique physiology allowed them to bridge the gap between human and Sheliak knowledge, accelerating the research. One evening, as they took a break from the tests, Stella turned to Jeffrey, her bioluminescence pulsing softly. "I never imagined this," she said, her voice filled with wonder. "To be the key to saving my people, and to find such a connection with you." Jeffrey took her hand, marveling at how natural it felt despite their physical differences. "I know," he replied. "It's like we're two parts of a whole we never knew existed." Their moment was interrupted by one of the Sheliak guardians, its patterns indicating urgency. They followed it to a vast chamber where Captain Blackwood and Dr. Rodriguez were already waiting. The guardian began to communicate, its bioluminescence flickering rapidly. Jeffrey and Stella translated in tandem. "They're explaining their history," Stella began. "A catastrophic event in their past," Jeffrey continued, "forced them to create these seed ships." "The hybridization project was their last hope," Stella added, her voice thick with emotion. As the days wore on, the Horizon's crew, now more adapted to their environment, began to explore the station. They discovered marvels of Sheliak technology and culture, each finding filling Dr. Rodriguez's tablet with new data. It was during one of these explorations that Ensign Patel accidentally activated a long-dormant communication array. The station's location broadcast across the galaxy, an unintended beacon calling out to the stars. The response came swiftly. A human military vessel, the UES Thunderbolt, arrived first, its imposing form dwarfing the horizon. Admiral Helena Cho's face appeared on the monitor, her expression a mix of relief and suspicion. "Captain Blackwood," she said, her voice crisp and authoritative, "you have a lot of explaining to do. What exactly is going on here?" Blackwood straightened, knowing the delicacy of the situation. "Admiral, it's a long story. We've made first contact with the Sheliak and uncovered a situation that could have far-reaching consequences for both our species." As Blackwood began to explain, more ships appeared in the sector, drawn by the station's broadcast. Alien vessels of various designs surrounded the station, their intentions unknown. In the research lab, a Sheliak scientist approached Jeffrey and Stella, its patterns indicating excitement. "They've had a breakthrough," Jeffrey translated for Dr. Rodriguez. "But..." Stella's bioluminescence flickered rapidly as she processed the information. "They need human volunteers," she said, her voice hesitant. "Many of them, to undergo a modified version of what happened to Jeffrey." Dr. Rodriguez's eyes widened as she realized the implications. "We need to tell the captain," she said urgently. "This changes everything." As they rushed to inform Captain Blackwood, the station's docking bays were already opening to receive representatives from the newly arrived ships. The captain found himself at the center of a rapidly escalating interstellar incident, with the fate of multiple species hanging in the balance. Jeffrey and Stella exchanged a look, their hybrid physiology allowing them to sense the gravity of the moment. They knew that whatever happened next would reshape the future of both their species, and potentially the entire galaxy. The arrival of the UES Thunderbolt and the subsequent influx of alien vessels transformed the once quiet sector into a bustling hub of interstellar activity. Captain Blackwood found himself at the center of a rapidly unfolding diplomatic crisis, with the fate of multiple species hanging in the balance. As alien representatives began to dock at the station, Admiral Cho wasted no time in establishing a temporary coalition to manage the situation. Captain Blackwood, along with key members of his crew, joined the Admiral in a hastily prepared conference room aboard the station. "We need to control the narrative here," Admiral Cho said, her voice firm as she addressed the assembled group. "This hybridization technology could reshape the balance of power in the galaxy, We can't afford to let it fall into the wrong hands. Captain Blackwood nodded, acutely aware of the weight of the moment. Agreed, Admiral, but we also can't ignore the potential benefits. The Sheliak are facing extinction, and this could be their only hope. As if on cue, a group of Sheliak guardians entered the room, their bioluminescent patterns pulsing with what seemed to be a mix of anticipation and concern. Jeffrey and Stella, who had been quietly observing from the sidelines, stepped forward to translate. They want to assure us that their intentions are peaceful, Stella began, her own patterns flickering in response to the Guardians. They see this as an opportunity for mutual benefit and growth. Jeffrey continued, his eyes glowing softly as he processed the telepathic communication. But they're also worried about the reaction of the other species. They fear that some might see this technology as a threat. Admiral Cho's expression hardened. And they'd be right to worry. We've already received transmissions from several of the alien vessels demanding access to the research data. As the meeting progressed, delegates from the newly arrived alien species began to filter in. The room soon became a cacophony of different languages, with translation devices working overtime to keep up. Captain Blackwood watched as alliances formed and dissolved in real time, each species jockeying for position in this new interstellar landscape. Meanwhile, aboard the Horizon, Dr. Rodriguez was making a startling discovery. In her makeshift lab, she pored over the latest data from the crew's medical scans, her eyes widening in disbelief. "This can't be right," she muttered, running the analysis again. But the results were the same. The physiological changes in the crew weren't stabilizing as expected. Instead, they were accelerating. She quickly composed a message to Captain Blackwood, her fingers flying over the console. "Captain, we have a situation. The crew's transformations are progressing more rapidly than anticipated. Some are developing advanced Sheliak characteristics, including telepathic abilities. We need to discuss this immediately." Back in the conference room, Captain Blackwood received the message just as the negotiations were reaching a critical point. He excused himself, pulling Admiral Cho aside to share the news. The Admiral's face paled as she processed the information. "This changes everything," she said, her voice low and urgent. "We need to quarantine the affected crew members immediately, and all hybridization experiments need to be halted until we understand what's happening." But when they presented this proposal to the Sheliak representatives, they were met with unexpected resistance. The Sheliak scientists viewed the accelerated changes as a positive development, a sign of the compatibility between human and Sheliak DNA. "They're saying this could lead to a new advanced species," Jeffrey translated, his own excitement evident in his voice, "one that could adapt to a variety of environments across the galaxy." As the debate intensified, Jeffrey and Stella found themselves caught in the middle. Their unique status as successful hybrids made them the subject of intense scrutiny from all sides. Other alien species began to express interest in participating in the hybridization experiments, seeing it as an opportunity to enhance their own capabilities. But not everyone shared this enthusiasm. Some delegates argued vehemently for the containment or outright destruction of the technology, fearing its potential to upset the current balance of power in the galaxy. As tensions rose in the conference room, an urgent communication came through from the Horizon. Lieutenant Hawkins's voice crackled over the comm system, tinged with panic. "Captain, we have a situation. Lieutenant Chen and a group of crew members have taken control of key systems. They're demanding full integration with Sheliak technology and society. Sir, they're threatening to expose the rest of the crew to intensified hybridization procedures if their demands aren't met." Captain Blackwood's mind raced as he processed this new crisis. He looked at Jeffrey and Stella, seeing in their eyes a reflection of the turmoil he felt. The fate of his crew, of humanity, and of the Sheliak species now hung in the balance. "Jeffrey, Stella," he said, his voice low and urgent, "I need your help. You're the only ones who truly understand both perspectives. We need to find a way to purpose this peacefully before it's too late." The hybrid pair nodded, their bioluminescence pulsing in unison. As they prepared to embark on their dangerous mission to confront the rebel crew members, they knew that their actions in the coming hours could reshape the future of interstellar relations forever. Captain Blackwood watched them go, acutely aware that the Horizon had become a microcosm of the larger debate raging around them. As factions formed among his crew based on their views of the hybridization process, he realized that the resolution of this conflict would have implications far beyond their single ship or even their two species. With a deep breath, he turned back to the assembled delegates, ready to navigate the treacherous waters of interstellar diplomacy while his ship teetered on the brink of chaos. The next few hours would determine not just the fate of the horizon, but potentially the future of the entire galaxy. As Captain Blackwood turned back to face the assembled delegates, the weight of the situation bore down on him. The fate of his crew, the future of human-alien relations, and the potential for interstellar conflict all hung in the balance. He took a deep breath, preparing to navigate the treacherous diplomatic waters. Meanwhile, Jeffrey and Stella moved swiftly through the horizon's corridors, their hybrid physiology allowing them to blend seamlessly with the ship's environment. Their bioluminescent patterns shifted and pulsed, camouflaging them against the walls as they approached the rebel-controlled sections. Jeffrey's enhanced hearing picked up the sound of hurried footsteps and agitated voices. He placed a hand on Stella's arm, signaling her to stop. They pressed themselves against a bulkhead, their skin mimicking the metallic surface. "I can sense their presence," Stella whispered, her eyes glowing faintly. "They're scared, but also excited. It's like they're drunk on their new abilities." Jeffrey nodded, his own senses attuned to the subtle shifts in the ship's atmosphere. "We need to be careful. Their heightened state could make them unpredictable." As they ventured deeper into rebel territory, the ship's interior began to change. Tendrils of bioorganic material snaked along the walls, pulsing with an eerie, otherworldly light. The air grew thick with a strange, sweet-smelling mist that made their skin tingle. They rounded a corner and came face to face with a startling sight. A group of crew members, their bodies partially transformed, were interfaced directly with the ship's systems. Their hands had melded with control panels, and glowing filaments extended from their temples, connecting them to the ship's neural network. "My God," Jeffrey breathed, his voice barely audible. "They're becoming one with the horizon." Stella's bioluminescence flickered rapidly, reflecting her growing unease. "We need to find Chen. He's the key to all this." As they searched for the rebel leader, Captain Blackwood and Admiral Cho worked feverishly to contain the situation. Security teams in bulky protective suits created buffer zones, sealing off sections of the ship to prevent the spread of the accelerated hybridization process. "We need to buy time," Blackwood said, his voice tense as he coordinated with the security teams. "If we can isolate the affected areas, we might have a chance to reverse this." Admiral Cho nodded grimly, her eyes fixed on the tactical display. "I've got the Thunderbolt on high alert. If any of those alien ships make a move on the horizon, we'll be ready." Outside, the situation grew increasingly volatile. Alien vessels jockeyed for position, their weapons systems humming with awe-inspiring energy. The Sheliak space station, sensing the growing threat, began to transform. Massive sections of its structure shifted and reconfigured, revealing hidden defense systems that had lain dormant for millennia. Back on the horizon, Jeffrey and Stella finally located Lieutenant Chen in what had once been the ship's main engineering bay. The room had been transformed into a grotesque hybrid of human and Sheliak technology. At its center stood Chen, his body radically altered, tendrils of bioorganic material extending from his form and connecting him to the ship's systems. "Welcome," Chen said, his voice resonating with an otherworldly timbre. "Have you come to join us in our ascension?" Jeffrey stepped forward, his hands raised in a placating gesture. "Chen, listen to me. This isn't ascension. It's dangerous, uncontrolled mutation. We need to stop this before it's too late." Chen's eyes, now glowing with an intense inner light, fixed on Jeffrey. "Too late? No, my friend. We're just beginning. Can't you see? This is the next step in human evolution. We're becoming something greater, something that can truly bridge the gap between species." Stella moved to Jeffrey's side, her own hybrid form a stark contrast to Chen's twisted appearance. "But at what cost, Chen? Look at what you're doing to the crew, to the ship. This isn't cooperation, it's assimilation." Chen's face contorted into a snarl, the bioorganic tendrils around him writhing in agitation. "You're blind to the possibilities. We have the power to reshape the galaxy, to bring all species together under a single, unified form. As Chen spoke, alarms began to blare throughout the ship. The rebel leader's eyes widened, a manic grin spreading across his face. Ah, it seems our guests have arrived. The true test begins now. Jeffrey and Stella exchanged a worried glance, realizing that the situation had escalated beyond their control. As they prepared to face whatever new threat was approaching, they knew that the next few moments would determine not just their fate, but potentially the future of the entire galaxy. The tension in the air was palpable as Jeffrey and Stella faced Lieutenant Chen, their bodies poised for action. Suddenly, Chen's eyes widened, his attention drawn to something behind them. "The chamber," he whispered, his voice filled with awe and hunger. Jeffrey and Stella turned to see an advanced hybridization chamber, its sleek form pulsing with an otherworldly energy. In that moment, they made a decision that would alter the course of events. Instead of destroying the chamber as their initial instincts suggested, they approached it cautiously. Their hybrid physiology allowed them to interface with the complex systems in ways that neither humans nor Sheliak could alone. "We can use this," Stella said, her fingers dancing over the controls. "There might be a way to stabilize the process, to find a solution that benefits both species." Jeffrey nodded, his own hands moving in concert with Stella's. "It's a risk, but it's our best chance to save everyone." As they worked, Captain Blackwood implemented his own daring plan. He gathered a small group of volunteers from the non-affected crew members, including Dr. Rodriguez. "What I'm asking is dangerous," Blackwood told them, his voice grave. "But if we can control the hybridization process, we might be able to understand it better and find a way to help those already affected." Dr. Rodriguez stepped forward, her face set with persistence. "I'm in, Captain. Someone needs to document this from a medical perspective." Admiral Cho watched the proceedings with a mix of concern and reluctant acceptance. "I don't like this, Blackwood, but I'll allow it on one condition. The process must be reversible." Outside the horizon, the situation deteriorated rapidly. The alien coalition, frustrated by their lack of access to the hybridization technology, began to make aggressive moves towards the Sheliak space station. The station's defense systems sprang to life, firing warning shots that sizzled past the encroaching vessels. The space around the horizon lit up with weapons fire and shields flaring to life. Inside the rebel-controlled section, Chen and his followers continued to evolve at an alarming rate. Their bodies took on more extreme Sheliak characteristics, their skin glowing with intricate patterns that shifted and changed as they communicated silently among themselves. Chen raised his hand, and a nearby console exploded in a shower of sparks. "Our control over the ship grows stronger by the minute," he said, his voice resonating with newfound power. "Soon, we'll be able to guide humanity to its true destiny." In the makeshift hybridization chamber, Dr. Rodriguez gasped as the process began to take effect. Her mind raced, processing information at an unprecedented rate. As her body changed, new neural pathways formed, allowing her to see connections she'd never noticed before. "Captain," she called out, her voice tinged with excitement and a hint of fear. "The hybridization isn't just altering our DNA, it's activating dormant genes present in both humans and Sheliak. The implications are staggering." Meanwhile, Jeffrey and Stella made a startling discovery as they delved deeper into the advanced chamber systems. Hidden within layers of code and biological data was evidence of an ancient collaboration. "This technology," Jeffrey said, his eyes wide with disbelief, "it wasn't developed solely by the Sheliak. There are traces of human influence here, dating back centuries." Stella's bioluminescent patterns flickered rapidly as she processed this information. An ancient human expedition? But that would mean that this entire situation might have been set in motion long ago, Jeffrey finished. "We need to tell the captain." But as they attempted to transmit their findings, Lieutenant Chen intercepted the communication. His evolved abilities allowed him to process the information instantly, and a look of triumphant vindication spread across his face. "At last," Chen exclaimed, his voice echoing through the ship's systems. "Proof of our shared destiny." Using his newfound powers, Chen broadcast a powerful telepathic message throughout the horizon and to the surrounding alien vessels. The message carried fragments of the ancient human-Sheliak connection, along with vivid imagery of a potential integrated future. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. Humans and aliens alike reeled from the psychic onslaught, their minds filled with confusing visions and half-formed ideas. Captain Blackwood stumbled, gripping the edge of a console for support as the telepathic wave washed over him. As the disorientation passed, he realized with a sinking feeling that the situation had spiraled far beyond his ability to control. With a heavy heart, he made the difficult decision to relinquish sole command of the horizon. "Admiral Cho," he said, his voice hoarse, "we need to form a joint council. It's the only way to address this crisis." As the newly formed council convened, consisting of Blackwood, Cho, a Sheliak guardian, and representatives from the alien coalition, Jeffrey and Stella continued their work within the advanced hybridization chamber. Their fingers flew over the controls, their hybrid minds processing data at incredible speeds. Just as they began to uncover a potential method for stabilizing the hybridization process, the chamber suddenly hummed to life. Energy crackled around them, forming a cocoon that enveloped their bodies. Jeffrey reached out, his fingers intertwining with Stella's as the energy field intensified. "Stella?" he gasped, feeling his body begin to change in ways he couldn't comprehend. "Whatever happens, we're in this together." As their transformation accelerated, waves of energy pulsed outward from the chamber. The ship's systems flickered, and in space, weapons and communication arrays on all vessels suddenly went dark. The horizon, the Sheliak space station, and the assembled alien fleet hung suspended in an eerie calm. Inside the energy cocoon, Jeffrey and Stella's bodies continued to change, their forms blurring as they underwent a hybridization more profound than anything seen before. The Joint Council, newly formed and already faced with an unprecedented crisis, watched in stunned silence as the energy readings from the hybridization chamber spiked to levels never before recorded. As the cocoon pulsed with increasing intensity, all those present, human, Sheliak, and alien alike, held their breath, knowing that whatever emerged from this moment would forever alter the course of galactic history. As the Joint Council grappled with the enormity of the situation, the energy cocoon surrounding Jeffrey and Stella pulsed with increasing intensity. Suddenly, it burst open with a blinding flash of light, temporarily disabling all electronic systems in the vicinity. Captain Blackwood shielded his eyes, blinking away the afterimages. As his vision cleared, he gasped at the sight before him. Jeffrey and Stella stood where the cocoon had been, but they were fundamentally changed. Their bodies shimmered with an otherworldly radiance, intricate bioluminescent patterns dancing across their skin in perfect synchronization with their thoughts and emotions. "By the stars," Admiral Cho whispered, her usual composure shaken. Jeffrey flexed his fingers, marveling at the newfound sensations coursing through his body. He turned to Stella, their eyes meeting in a moment of shared wonder and understanding. "We need to act quickly," Stella said, her voice carrying a harmonious blend of human and Sheliak tones. Without further hesitation, they moved in perfect unison towards the ship's main control terminal. Their fingers danced across the interface, effortlessly bypassing security protocols and accessing the core systems. "What are they doing?" one of the alien representatives demanded, reaching for a weapon. Captain Blackwood held up a hand. "Wait, let's see what happens." As Jeffrey and Stella worked, the ship's failing life support systems began to stabilize. Lights flickered back to life, and the ominous creaking of stressed bulkheads ceased. "They're saving the ship," Dr. Rodriguez said, her own hybrid physiology allowing her to partially comprehend the complexity of their actions. Simultaneously, Jeffrey and Stella established a telepathic link with the Sheliak space station. Their minds expanded, accessing vast stores of scientific knowledge accumulated over millennia. "Incredible," Jeffrey breathed, his eyes wide with awe. "The hybridization project, it's more than we ever imagined." Stella nodded, her bioluminescent patterns pulsing rapidly. "We need to share this with the Council." They turned to face the assembled group, their expressions grave yet filled with hope. "We have a solution," Jeffrey announced, his voice resonating with newfound authority. "A way to control the hybridization process and stabilize those already affected. Stella stepped forward, her gaze sweeping across the council members. Our plan allows for gradual integration of human and Shellyak traits without risking uncontrolled evolution or loss of individual identity. As they outlined their proposal, the council members listened with rapt attention. Even the Shellyak representative, usually inscrutable, showed signs of interest. Furthermore, Jeffrey continued, we can reverse the extreme effects on Lieutenant Chen and his followers. We can help them, along with the partially hybridized crew members. Captain Blackwood leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. And you're certain this can be done safely? Stella nodded. With our combined knowledge and abilities, yes. Before the council could respond, alarms blared throughout the ship. Admiral Cho rushed to a nearby tactical display, her face hardening as she took in the information. We're under attack, she announced grimly. A faction of the alien coalition, led by the Zorn, has opened fire on both the Horizon and the Shellyak station. Chaos erupted in the council chamber as representatives shouted accusations and demands for action. Jeffrey and Stella exchanged a look of commitment. We can help, Jeffrey said, stepping towards the main control interface. Together, they interfaced directly with the ship's systems, their hybrid physiology allowing them to process information at unprecedented speeds. Within moments, they had activated the Shellyak station's advanced defense systems. A shimmering energy barrier sprang to life, encompassing both the station and the Horizon. The Zorn's weapons fire dissipated harmlessly against the shield. That will hold them for now, Stella said, her bioluminescent patterns pulsing with exertion. But we need to act quickly to implement our stabilization plan. Captain Blackwood nodded, his military training kicking in. Dr. Rodriguez, assist them with treating Lieutenant Chen and his followers. Admiral Cho, coordinate our defensive efforts with the Shellyak Guardians. As the crew sprang into action, Jeffrey and Stella continued to work tirelessly, their enhanced abilities allowing them to multitask on an incredible scale. They monitored the battle outside, fine-tuned the hybridization treatment, and delved deeper into the Shellyak database. Suddenly, Jeffrey's eyes widened. Stella, look at this, he said, his voice filled with awe. Together they examined the data, their minds racing to process the implications. Hidden within the ancient Shellyak records was evidence of an even more ancient species, one responsible for seeding both human and Shellyak life throughout the galaxy. This changes everything, Stella whispered. As they prepared to share this world-shaking revelation with the Council, the space battle outside intensified. The alien coalition fractured, with some ships turning against the Zorn aggressors, while others pressed their attack with renewed vigor. Jeffrey and Stella stood at the heart of the maelstrom, their bodies glowing with the combined potential of two united species. They knew that their next actions would shape the course of galactic history, but the path forward remained uncertain. The Horizon shuddered under a particularly heavy barrage, and klaxons blared. Captain Blackwood turned to the hybrid pair, his expression a mix of hope and desperation. Whatever you're planning, he said, we're running out of time. Time. Captain Blackwood's voice cut through the chaos, his eyes fixed on Jeffrey and Stella. What's your plan? Jeffrey and Stella exchanged a determined look, their bioluminescent patterns pulsing in unison. Without a word, they moved to the central control console, their fingers flying over the interface with inhuman speed and precision. We're going to broadcast a message, Jeffrey explained, his voice resonating with newfound authority, one that will reach every ship in this sector. Stella nodded, her eyes gleaming with purpose. It's time to show everyone the truth about our shared history. As they worked, the ship's systems hummed to life, energy crackling through conduits and relays. The Horizon's communication array linked with the Shellyak space station, amplifying their signal to unprecedented levels. Brace yourselves, Stella warned, her bioluminescent patterns flaring brightly. With a surge of power, Jeffrey and Stella channeled their combined hybrid abilities into the transmission. A burst of energy pulsed outward, carrying with it a vivid, immersive projection that flooded the minds of every being in range. Across the sector, battles ground to a halt as combatants were overwhelmed by the message. The projection unfolded in their minds, revealing the grand design of an ancient species, a plan that had set both humans and Sheliak on a path to reunification. On the bridge of the UES Thunderbolt, Admiral Cho gasped as the images washed over her. "Impossible," she whispered, her hardened exterior cracking in the face of this revelation. In the Zorn flagship, the alien commander's tentacles trembled as it processed the information. For the first time in generations, doubt crept into its warrior mind. Taking advantage of the momentary ceasefire, Jeffrey and Stella moved to the next phase of their plan. They initiated a controlled release of a modified version of Stella's pheromones, carefully calibrated to affect both humans and aliens alike. The specialized compound spread through the ventilation systems of the Horizon and the Sheliak station before being transmitted as a molecular pattern that could be replicated by the other ships in the vicinity. As the pheromones took effect, a wave of heightened empathy swept through the sector. The Zorn, who had been at the forefront of the attack, suddenly found themselves experiencing the emotions and perspectives of their adversaries. One Zorn lieutenant turned to its commander, mandibles quivering. I can feel their fear, their purpose. It's not so different from our own." Aboard the Horizon, the effects were equally profound. Lieutenant Chen, now stabilized, approached Captain Blackwood with clear eyes and a steady voice. "Captain," Chen said, "I think I can recalibrate our shields to better withstand the Zorn weapons." Without waiting for a response, he moved to a nearby console, his fingers dancing across the controls with enhanced speed and accuracy. Dr. Rodriguez watched in amazement as other hybrid crew members seamlessly integrated their newfound abilities, repairing damaged systems and innovating solutions on the spot. "This is incredible," she murmured, her own hybrid mind racing with possibilities. On the bridge of the UES Thunderbolt, Admiral Cho felt the last of her resistance crumble. The combined effect of the ancient truth and the empathy-inducing pheromones left her with a clarity she had never before experienced. With a deep breath, she opened a channel to the alien coalition. "This is Admiral Cho of the United Earth Fleet. I am calling for an immediate ceasefire and propose the formation of an interstellar council to oversee the ethical implementation of hybridization technology." As tensions de-escalated across the sector, Jeffrey and Stella turned their attention to the Sheliak space station. They created a temporary hybridization chamber, extending an invitation to representatives from all species to experience a controlled, reversible process. The first volunteers approached with a mix of trepidation and curiosity. A Zorn warrior, antenna twitching nervously, stepped into the chamber alongside a human ensign from the Thunderbolt. As the hybridization process took hold, their bodies shimmered with a soft light. When it faded, they emerged changed, not just physically, but in a fundamental way that allowed them to perceive and understand each other on a level previously thought impossible. The Zorn turned to the human, its compound eyes wide with wonder. I can see the universe through your eyes," it said, its translated voice thick with emotion. The human nodded, equally awestruck. "And I through yours. All this time, all our conflicts. We're born of misunderstanding," the Zorn finished. As more volunteers underwent the process, a palpable shift occurred throughout the assembled fleet. Ancient animosities began to dissolve, replaced by a growing sense of unity and shared purpose. Captain Blackwood, watching these developments unfold, felt a surge of inspiration. He turned to Jeffrey and Stella, his eyes alight with possibility. "What if we could extend this opportunity beyond our current situation?" he asked. "The Horizon could become a symbol of this new era, an interstellar diplomatic vessel, offering the hybridization process to interested species across the galaxy." Jeffrey and Stella exchanged a look, their bioluminescent patterns pulsing with excitement. "It's possible," Jeffrey said, his mind already racing with the technical challenges. Stella nodded, her expression determined. "We could oversee the process, ensure it's done safely and ethically." As discussions began in earnest, the Sheliak Guardians approached. Their usually inscrutable faces now showed clear signs of hope and anticipation. "We wish to join this mission," the lead Guardian announced. "Our people have long awaited a chance at redemption. Perhaps this is the path we were always meant to follow." As the immediate crisis subsided and plans for the future took shape, Jeffrey and Stella found a moment of relative calm. They stood together in the Horizon's observation deck, watching as the once hostile fleet now moved in harmonious patterns, ships of different designs and origins working together to repair damage and establish new communication links. Jeffrey reached out, taking Stella's hand in his, their bioluminescent patterns synchronized, creating a soft, pulsing glow that seemed to encompass them both. "Did you ever imagine it would turn out like this?" he asked softly. Stella's mandibles clicked in what Jeffrey now recognized as a gentle laugh. "Never," she admitted, "but I wouldn't change a thing." As they stood there, contemplating the vast expanse of space and the even vaster potential of their shared future, alarms began to sound throughout the ship. But these were not the klaxons of battle or emergency. Instead, they signaled the beginning of something new, the start of the Horizon's transformation into a vessel of peace and understanding. Jeffrey and Stella exchanged a look of dedication and anticipation. Their journey was not nearly finished. In fact, it was only just beginning.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel. And for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.